Welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg, back for another episode for Horror Week 2023 right here at Capes and Tights. This episode features comic book storyteller, horror comic book writer and artist, Joseph Schmalke to the podcast. He's returning for another episode with us to talk horror comics, his comics, We Don't Kill Spiders, and 7 Years in Darkness, and so much more. Make sure to listen to all the content and read all the content right here on Horror Week at Capes and Tights. Visit capesandtights.com/horror. You can also visit us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky. And rate, review, subscribe, all those things over at Apple and Spotify and all your major podcasting platforms. But this episode is with our friend Joseph Schmalke talking horror comic books. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast, Joseph Schmalke. How are you, sir?
Good.
I use sir very loosely, man. I mean, how are you, man?
I'm excited that it's October. The best time of the year in my house. We got a little delayed on decorating this year because my wife wanted to redo the deck, but finally the Halloween stuff has started to make it outside. So.
Yeah, it's like we talked about that with my wife and I were like, it's actually becoming like all of September, all the way to like Thanksgiving for us now. Like decorations, horror movies, Halloween themed things. It's like a 2-month, 3-month expansive thing nowadays. When it used to be just for the month of October. We're excited for the fall and all that stuff as well. But yeah, it's a fun month. It's your favorite month, right?
Yeah, it's me and my wife's anniversary on Halloween. Yep. Married. It'll be 13 years ago. Crazy.
Great year for that, right? 13 years.
And Friday the 13th and me and Ryan Wing got the small space over at Queen City Cinemas so we could watch 2 of the Friday the 13th movies this Friday.
Which ones are you watching? Do you know?
I won't be at my booth past 5:30 because I'll be heading to Queen City Cinemas.
Yeah. Do you know what you're watching though? Which ones?
I get part 4 and part 6.
Okay.
Those were our top 2. Well, my favorite one is part 4. His favorite one is part 6. So
that's awesome. That's so much fun. I love it. I watched. I hadn't watched. So just preface this. I mean, we've known each other for a couple of years now, but I have not been a huge horror movie fan, or like just not fan, but just hadn't been into it or horror things in general until about 5 years ago. And that, I think me reading a lot more horror comic books got me into the genre of horror. And so the past 2 years, like around this time, I've been like just binging horror movies. And so I've been able to like watch all the Friday the 13th and Halloweens. And then this year I expanded a little bit more. I just watched The Sadist. Have you ever seen The Sadist?
No,
1960 something or something like that. I was a recommendation from our friend Jeremy Dauber, who's watching like 300 and some odd horror movies and research for his book. But I've been watching some obscure ones and all that stuff, but it took me a while. I hadn't even seen Friday the 13th, the first one, until last year. I know it's bad, but
no, it's not bad. It's one of these things like growing up, that's what my mom and my father liked. My dad was a classic Universal monster, black and white film type guy. And my mom was into like straight up slashers, like Brainless, Don't Go Into the Woods, Nightmare on Elm Street, just horrific slasher films. That was her favorite genre. She actually didn't like The Shining, so I had to see that one on my own at a later date because she was too freaked out by it. But I think it's great to embrace it later in life. I always figure that people that haven't really been into horror movies, they would never at this point, because it's like a teen. When you're in your teens, you'll get into it. But I think horror has become a lot more intelligent over the last couple decades as well. So there's that studio A24, they just churn out nothing but really bizarre horror stuff. I just saw Lamb like 2 months. I wouldn't necessarily say it's horror, but it teeters on that border. And then this year they put out the film Talk to Me, which I think is one of the best horror films that came out in 2023. And of course, they put out Hereditary and Midsummer, and I can't remember if they put out The Witch, but The Witch came out in the last decade, and so did It Follows. It Follows is a really good
It Follows is a crazy movie. I just watched Hereditary this year for the first time, which was amazing. And it Talk to Me is on my list to watch in the next week or so. I put together a list of movies that I need to get, in intake over this next couple of weeks, and that's on that list. And I watched The Witch earlier this season, actually.
A whole bunch of, like, Paramount and Hulu have a whole bunch of new stuff that they put out this year as well. And I've just been like working my way through whatever they're putting out that day. I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try, because most of this stuff is a new idea. Horror is like one of the last pieces of cinema that doesn't have to be $1 billion film to make. They very much got like an 80s, 70s, 80s aesthetic to filmmaking, where a couple $1 million, they make a pretty good movie. Sets don't have to be like crazy elaborate or anything like that, and it's all practical. Well, at least the really good ones are. If it goes too digital, it kind of looks like dog crap. But
I was just reading up. My wife and I are watching the Castle Rock TV show that was on Hulu there for a little while, and they actually, I was looking at the notes, the only special effects they used a lot in that show was like fake snow, because obviously they're in a place that they were trying to film. They weren't filming in the snow, and so they had the snow. And I was like, that's pretty crazy to think about, that there isn't. If you think of horror films, they're mostly practical effects. There are some special effects that need to be added afterwards, but that makes it, I don't know, a lot of us like more practical effects movies in general. But yeah, it makes it so it can't look as bad. You know what I mean? Like sometimes if you have not very good special effects, it makes the movie look even worse. I'd rather have bad practical effects than bad special effects, if that makes any sense.
No, if you can, like, if it looks real, if it looks tangible, it just, I don't know, it has a different vibe to it. If you look at anything that George Romero was doing earlier on, and then anything Tom Savini is involved with, right? And then of course you've got The Thing, the 80s John Carpenter's The Thing, which is probably the greatest practical effect movie ever made. Like nothing else has like come close to it as far as I'm concerned. Cronenberg, he does some Videodrome, and there's a couple other films that he uses a lot of great special practical effects. The Fly.
Yes. And I think just like any genre of movie or any genre of book or anything like that, the more you intake, the more you can actually appreciate or like critique on your own and things. And so like that was one of the things that I, not growing up watching very many horror movies, when you watch one every 5 years and it wasn't very good, or it was extremely well, you just don't know on the scale of things. It's hard to like really get the genre. Now that I've been intaking hundreds of horror movies over the past couple of years, I've been able to say, oh, that's a good one, that's a bad one, because of the fact that I have more knowledge. Yeah. And it's more, it's more to it that way.
Yeah. You've got hillbilly horror, and you've got J horror, and you've got, all these different sub brands of the horror genre, and some are just fantastic. And even the really bad ones, you can find some merit in them every once in a while. I did watch, I don't know if you watch Shudder's The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs.
No, not yet, no.
He gets his hands on probably the most unwatchable shit, and then he does commentary. He cuts in partway through the showing of the film, and he talks about it, and that actually makes it really watchable. They did a VHS night, which was stuff that was made on a VHS camera. It's bad. It's really bad. But it's worth watching if you're watching it narrated
that way. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And that's something I would never have gotten into if it wasn't for it. And it brings me back to the idea of horror as a genre wasn't really up my alley until I started reading horror comic books. And I don't know if it was just the merge of one passion, and I liked it. I really loved comics, and then I started reading horror comics, and that made me go, oh, maybe I like some horror movies, and I picked the right ones. Maybe I don't even remember what the first like in my binging of horror movies was to watch. It might have been like Halloween or any of those movies, that just because they were like in the popular culture.
Sure.
But like horror comic books, and then I still love horror comic books, and now I'm starting reading a lot more horror novels. And horror is just become part of my, if you're going to give me an option now, I'm going to choose horror over anything else, including superhero on big two books, and comedies on TV and you know, stuff like that, which is something that I used to like just gravitate towards in the first place. But yeah, so you obviously grew up watching horror movies, like you mentioned, but what got you into, like, was it just your love for horror in general that got you into writing comic books in the horror genre? Or
Me and my family, we used to collect eerie comics, and what was the other one? Creepy, and of course Tales from the Crypt and stuff like that. Really, what, you know, the first comic books that resonated with me were the ones that were like terrifying storylines. Spider-Man's Kraven's Last Hunt. I mean, it's pretty dark. It deals with like a monster rat person eating women in the sewers of New York City. You've got suicide. It's a very dark book, and it does border on like a horror movie. So that was like one of my first attractions to mainstream comics. And then, of course, you know, my love of the older, because I mean, the history behind comic books is the top selling books were always these horror comics until the Comics Code Authority came along and started saying that children were going to become degenerates by reading books. So that sort of killed the entire horror industry in comic books, and everything shifted towards superheroes. But even superheroes used to be like super violent and over the top. And so it wasn't until Alan Moore came around writing his run on Swamp Thing that they were like, you know, we don't really need this Comic Code Authority anymore. And what was he writing? He was writing horror, right? Swamp Thing, horror. So yeah, that's always been my attraction to it. It wasn't necessarily the movies. I worked briefly for like 3.5 years out in Hollywood. I made a horror movie. It's not very good. I'm doing a screening of it on it's one of the weekends right before Halloween, around that time. And it'll be live on YouTube. But yeah, so I worked out there. I don't really like working with producers. Actors are a lot to deal with. And I always, you know, I went to school. I'm a classically trained painter. And it was really hard for me to sell my work off, because you spend a month on a piece and you want to get, you know, some value out of the efforts that you've put into this thing. And it wasn't really affordable, and I don't have a name at the time. So I was like, I need to find a way to get my artwork into people's hands, and I like to storytell, and comic books was a natural, and it was something I wanted to do when I was like 13. So I came back around, followed this childhood like dream of making comic books, and I didn't want to make superhero comics. I never did. So it was a natural way for me to just go into comic books and tell the stories that I wanted to tell. And the awesome thing about comics is I don't need a budget. I don't have to work with actors or producers. It's all based on my talent and my ability to storytell. So yeah, earlier stuff is a little bit rougher than the stuff that's coming out now. But yeah, I've been able to tell some pretty cool stories using horror as mostly the backdrop for everything I do, with the exception of one book. So.
And there is a resurgence, I believe, and maybe it's just because of I'm paying more attention to it, but I feel like there is a resurgence in independent horror books out there right now, with a lot of big name people writing horror books and having a horror attachment to it, which is pretty cool. Like I said, that's what me. I did like a breakdown one week of my 10 books I was picking up that week, and it was like 7 of them were in the independent horror genre, and like 3 of them were like either superhero or something else. It's just so much fun for us fans of horror to see this nowadays. And there's, again, same thing with movies. There's different styles and different types of these horror comic books. But I mean, you just created or just released the first 4 issues of 7 Years in Darkness, which you've come on and talked about pre-release, or right around the first release of the first issue, when it was at CEX, or when it went to CEX, I should say, because you released it pre CEX yourself. This has obviously been something you've been working on for quite a bit of time. How has the journey been so far for these 4 issues that have been released?
It's been well received, so that always makes me happy. There's actually 5 issues in the first year.
Yeah.
The last issue is like a standalone story. and it takes place between issues 3 and 4. And that's probably the best issue that I've produced so far. Currently working on the next year right now. So I'd like the trajectory to go up. I'd like it to get better with every year. I'll probably be done introducing most of the characters by the middle of or the beginning of year 3. And then it's more of a journey at that point, because now you've got all these characters sort of interacting with each other through this 7-year span. But yeah, I think it's been highly successful. The first 2 issues went to second printings. The first issue went actually to third printing. We decided not to do future printings on 3 and 4 because we're doing a collected. I'm calling it a progress report, right? Kids get sent home with a progress report. So that'll have all 4 issues from year 1 in it, and it will be coming out a month after the Shamir Worm. So if anybody missed the initial 4 issues, they'll have a chance to catch up on everything. And then we're putting out the trade in around San Diego this year or next year. And then I have a Kickstarter going right now, actually, for my other title, which is We Don't Kill Spiders. And the graphic novel it got funded in 15 hours. So that was pretty awesome. Unlocked a stretch goal to help me launch the second volume. So I'll be working on that and 7 Years in Darkness for at least a couple of years together, and probably not taking on too much else.
That's pretty awesome. It's so funny to see. I love, being a fan of yours, but also being a friend. I love seeing your success. Like, obviously, I was one of the backers at the very beginning of this run on the Kickstarter, but I kept on going back. Every time you share it, I'm like, okay, I backed it, but I want to see where it's at. And obviously, as a backer, you want to see the stretch goals and things like that too. But I just wanted to see the money go up for you, because I wanted to see you become more successful with the book.
Like, I had done Murder Hobo back in June, right? June, July, and we turned it around really fast. Like, everybody got their rewards already, and that was purposeful, because I was like, it's going to take a little bit longer to print a hardcover book. I have to do it overseas for cost reasons. But yeah, I was nervous. Me and Rich Woodall were in we were leaving Rose City Comic Con in Portland, Oregon, flying back to Portland, Maine. And I was like, oh man, I got to launch my Kickstarter, and I timed this really poorly. I'm not going to be able to like be there for like the first couple hours of the Kickstarter launch. We're going to be in the air. So I had my wife actually launch it, and I did a whole bunch of like pre-launch posts and stuff like that. And then when we landed, it was like 50% funded already. Like, oh, so I was very nervous though. So
I think in the future, you just now have to not pay attention for the first, 5 or 6 hours, and just it will do its thing.
Yeah, I wish. Honestly, I think that's a really bad idea. Or poorly planned it. But yeah, my anxiety level was not through the roof for once. That's the thing when you're doing crowdsourcing, it's like another job on top of the work that I already do. So I do writing, artwork. I handle all the business aspects of this, which nobody talks to you about ahead of time. But if you're going to do this full time, there's like basically 2 days of my entire week is doing emails and reaching out and paying bills and stuff like that. So buying supplies, it's all, it's a constant grind like this. So I work 7 days a week, but I don't work for anyone, so there is a trade-off. And it's a lot of hurry up and wait type work at times, where you do variant covers for companies, and you got to wait to hear back from the company whether or not they want alterations, or so you're in a certain mode and then you stop, and then you got to like pivot to another job. Sometimes it just, when you're in a creative field, it's really hard to go from one mode to another, so that can be difficult at times. But overall, the horror stuff just keeps flowing though.
Yeah. And you throw in the things like convention, things like that, throws a loop for you, so you were for a loop too. Like you were mentioning, your eyes were in the air. So those conventions don't help either.
in a while. Yeah, I cut back a lot this year, and next year it'll be even more. Just because I have to still produce stuff, right?
Mm.
I'm busy making material. I can't show up to every show because I've got stuff that I need to get out into the world. So,
and like, so are these two 7 Years in Darkness and We Don't Kill Spiders two of your favorite creations you've made over the years, or is these just the ones that are like current?
Spiders? Yeah, that's like my. I ended up getting into, like, I had to put it on hold for a while because we were dissolving Black Caravan, which was our horror imprint, and I was waiting to get the rights back and everything like that. So that kind of put everything into a stalled position for it. But now with the Kickstarter was actually, in all honesty, a way for me to gauge whether or not there was still an audience for it. There is. So I will be continuing. I always saw that as like, and I've said it before, I could write and draw We Don't Kill Spiders for the rest of my life and I'd be happy. 7 Years in Darkness was my escape from the drudgery of like not being able to work on We Don't Kill Spiders. And so I committed myself to a 7-year-long project that is growing with my daughter. So she also loves horror. I took her to see some films this year. I probably shouldn't have taken her to, like, I took her to see Talk to Me, and I took her to see Evil Dead Rise. Yeah, that was not the opening sequence for that. I was like, wow, I'm feeling as a father, right? She's of course manic laughing, and she's like, yeah, you shouldn't have brought a 12-year-old to see Evil Dead Rise. I'm like, yeah, well, but she enjoyed it. So one of the things with 7 Years in Darkness is, we talk when she gets home from school, and she tells me how her day is going and all the drama and stuff that's unfolding within the middle school. And I think it's just kind of fascinating. It reminds me of when I was a kid, and like I start remembering what I was doing when I was 11 or 12. And that's like feeding into the characters that I'm developing. And as those characters get older, their personalities change over time and they start to have different interests. And so the book grows with them. So
that's awesome. It's just so much fun to see. 7 Years in Darkness has been a fun journey to see over the past, year or two, just seeing it grow and seeing the fans, seeing people buy it. I mean, Galactic Comics in Bangor, every time he orders issues, they sell out immediately, which is really cool to see. I help Paul every once in a while with some pull lists, like pulling people's pull lists. And I'm like, oh, you're out of 7 Years in Darkness. And he's like, oh gosh, I got to order more every time. And so say that again.
It's the biggest complaint I have about the book is no one can get their hands on it. And I'm like, well, you got to take it up with your store, man.
Yes.
Like, if your store won't order it, then you got to go somewhere else that like has an online ordering system that you can put in your initial order. But yeah, I feel like it's a book that people keep missing the boat on too, for whatever reason. I can't do anything about it. I've tried to lead these horses to water. I can't make them drink. So I always include, there's several retailers that I send emails out to regularly. I believe Paul is on that list. And no one ever responds. So I'm just like, I'm trying, guys. But if you guys don't want to make me, that's
he
on
orders. I would say plenty. I mean, I always get the 1 in 10 variant from him. So that's at least that 10 copies. And Paul's store, Galactic Comics isn't a large comic book store. It's a small store. So he has to obviously think of. But he orders. I would say he probably orders 15 copies of each of the things, and then he orders the reprints and all that stuff, and still gets to the point where people are like, when you have 30 members on your pull list, not everybody reads horror, not everybody reads independent, and the fact that he still sells out that quickly is pretty fascinating. But he does still have a very few amount, if anybody wants, of the original store variant. He has like, I don't know, 3 or 4 left of those that are up on the shelf.
Oh, the Bob
Takic. Yeah, those are still, is there still a couple of those left? So if anybody wants those, go to Galactic Comics and Collectibles.com. They are there. But yeah, so, and then there's We Don't Kill Spiders. We Don't Kill Spiders has been something that when I first found out about Joseph Schmalke, was like one of those things that I really attracted me to your artwork style. That cover of issue 1 is just a beautiful cover, and the colors on there are gorgeous to me. And so that to me has maybe follow your career as a comic book creator. But like, what do you look for? When you create a horror comic book, is there some sort of elements that you want to put in these books specifically, or is just each story is its own thing? Or is there something that you're looking to try to get out of each horror story you tell?
So it's all pretty organic, you know. One of the things I'm including in the hardcover edition is sort of like this is the evolution of how this book came to be.
Mm-hmm.
So We Don't Kill Spiders was like a general idea. You know, I really like witchy stories. So both 7 Years and We Don't Kill Spiders are very witchy. With 7 Years, I made it this one academy in the whole world has all the practitioners of black magic study there, right? Well, if that's the case, it's not just a bunch of Americans,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's a worldwide thing. So it really helps, you know. I was able to, I'm a history buff. I love reading about mythology as well, and particular cultures, mythologies. So I'm able to tap into all these major world religions and use like their versions of angels and demons and monsters, and how would they practice magic that would be slightly different from Western magic. So that's that. With We Don't Kill Spiders, the initial idea was I was reading a story about the Witch of Enoch. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. I'm not going to go into it here, but she was a necromancer, and I was like, oh, that's, you know, and that's like a pretty common trope in role playing and stuff like that. And I believe at the time I was uh, playing Diablo or something like that, and there's a necromancer class, and I was like, this is so interesting, you know, the idea that you can speak with the dead, and like you're not just a diviner, you're a medium, and all these other things. So I had the initial concept was going to be modern day, and the necromancer was kind of like a street urchin that had like lost their mind from the dead, constantly like barraging them with like messages and stuff. And then it was you know, this necromancer was going to be hunting down a serial killer with the help of a detective that was more of like a James Ellroy styled hard-boiled Los Angeles cop. And I don't know, it wasn't working, the initial script, because it was modern day.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sat on a back burner for like a year. I wasn't really tapping into like too many horrific elements, and I was like, yeah, you can't get away with that today because people have cell phones. They'd call this shit in, yada yada. I was always really attracted to sort of the sword and sorcery genre of you know, Conan the Barbarian and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I kind of want to do that, but I like to have my stories take place in a physical world that we can identify, right? So it's sort of like Marvel and DC. Marvel, the heroes are in New York City, but in DC they're in Gotham or Metropolis.
Yeah.
Never really liked Gotham or Metropolis because they're not real places. But I can level with the X-Men living in upstate New York and Spider-Man living in Queens and all this other stuff. So yeah, I was like, all right. And I found like, you know, the capital, you know, one of these capitals of the Viking Age and some small towns around it. And I sort of built this town that is historically accurate. I never say what the town's name is, but I'm like, all right, this is where it's all happening, you know. And I looked at you know, did some history diving on how the hierarchy of Viking culture worked. And once I started doing that, I was like, that's where this is going to take place. You know, this whole thing is going to take place here. And so yeah, that was the levels of where it went. And then I got to play around with deities that don't exist or that might exist in other cultures. And yeah, added like a serial killer with a Sonny Bean type background. And if you don't know what Sonny Bean is, he was the head of a cannibalistic family. They based on Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the legend of Sonny Bean kind of thing. So that character, there's like a portion of her I don't want to give anything away, but a portion of that character, that Sonny Bean cannibalistic cult, is tied into the We Don't Kill Spiders story. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love hearing it. I love hearing it from the horse's mouth, as they say. But yeah, it's fun. Is this book going to be available for people outside of the Kickstarter, or is this like this trade?
One of the things that's happening now, and I haven't really announced it yet, but there's an Atomic Hearts comics Instagram and Facebook page. That's my new that's how I'm going to be doing direct marketing, direct distribution. And those are properties that I just own. They're not like, I'm acting as my own publisher basically starting next year. And so hardcover editions should be available, but there won't be a lot of them. It'll be like, there'll be a definite like cutoff, like this is how many this is the quantity that I have to sell on the direct market. And it'll only be a couple hundred copies, but it's a hardbound edition. It's a little bit pricier than a comic book. The idea is that after I put out this hardcover edition, I'd like it to sell out, hopefully on the direct market, because only so many people are coming to the Kickstarter, right? But after those sell out, then I should have a budget to reprint it again as a soft cover edition, and I can make that more of an open order where, however many copies are ordered will be filled type thing. And then the idea is that October of next year, you'll see issue 1 come out of We Don't Kill Spiders Volume 2.
And is that just gonna be Volume 2 and number 1, or is it going to be a number 5? Is it going to be the continuation?
It'll probably be like another 4 to 5 issue series for Volume 2. One of the I would love to do issue 5, issue 6, 7, but the thing is, no one's going to buy it, right?
Because it's been so long too since you've actually released those in single issues.
Yeah, the market is designed to only buy issue 1s. So it kind of sucks. I would love to have something that was more ongoing. We're going to test that with Murder Hobo, the current iteration of the series. Basically, as long as Ryan wants to draw it, I'll keep writing scripts, and we'll see how far we can get with it. But I don't think numbers will ever go up from what they are. It just kind of. I used to love, tracking down a 342 of the X-Men, or, whatever it was, and being fine with that being the number of it. But
they're doing that with Skybound is doing that with so Transformers is Transformers number 1, but G.I. Joe is like 302 because
so
they're taking over. Yeah, but I'm like, that's so confusing to so many people who are like, I didn't read Transformers comics, but I was like, I'll give it a shot. It's Daniel Warren Johnson. I love all his work, and I'll give it a shot. And I really like the Transformers number 1, but I was like, I don't know if you're taking over 302. Is it a new story? Is it a continuation? Whatever it is, it was just weird to me. But I feel like We Don't Kill Spiders needs number number 1, Legacy number 5, like Marvel.
Yeah, I think that I have considered in the past is doing legacy numbering, but I look at my series, all of them, as being more like Hellboy, right? He'd 5 to 6 issues, and it'd be like Seeds of Destruction. That's that series, and then so it won't be called Volume 2. My wife's suggestion was that I actually just finish at least the first couple issues before I give it its subtitle, because originally I was going to call it Goat with 1,000 Young, but that's like the longest title in history. So
especially with it, We Don't Kill Spiders, and then that it's like, if it was at least one word, if it was like or
yeah, it's already a sentence statement title, so it's like, same thing with 7 Years in Darkness. We were thinking about doing something like that, and I think it was Andy Schmidt, the publisher. He's like, no, we're just going to call it Year 2. I was like, okay, yeah. And he's like, yeah, it'll be Year 3, and then it'll be Year 4. So yeah, you got to kind of simplify it at some point. So if I can find a 1-word phrase for Volume 2, I will. Or it might just be called Volume 2. I don't know.
There you go. We don't know. We'll find out, right, when it comes out.
Yeah.
tease it a little bit, leave him wanting more.
But
But
yeah, I'm
yes,
working on this right now, and it's like I was getting discouraged about like the pages. I'm like, man, there's just not a hell of a lot happening here. There's only like one panel on every page that's creepy. But that's the thing you're trying to do with a horror comic. You're not, I mean, you can go for the gross out, which of course I do. But really, if you're trying to create suspense and stuff like that, it's a lot of like people looking terrified in the darkness, walking around, hearing noises, and then all of a sudden you get this one panel reveal that's not maybe totally revealing of the thing that's like hanging out in the darkness or the terror. So creating that sort of element, it's all about your page turns, it's all about the mood lighting. And sometimes you're just drawing some pages where like people are walking around like everything's fine, and then stuff goes awry, and that's not that interesting to draw, but you have to draw it. So
and you're still enjoying being the creator, drawing and writing these books, like We Don't Kill Spiders and stuff.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably a little bit of a control freak. So there are people that I am intending on working with for 2 other projects right now, besides, so Murder Hobo is with Ryan G. Brown. He's taken over as the partner on that book. Jason Lynch is still the, it was co-created by him. So the Kickstarter, he actually got paid out of that because that's how we do it. But yeah, it's just me and Ryan working on it now. And then I'm working with J.K. Woodward on a sort of science fiction cyberpunk meets the old gods book called One Last Trick. And I've vetted an artist who hasn't fully committed yet to working with me on another project. It fell apart. I had another artist attached, and that person couldn't keep the commitment. So I had to move on and find someone else. And again, We Don't Kill Spiders and 7 Years in Darkness are the 2 titles that I'm focused on just doing interiors and writing those stories. So I have other stories that I want to tell, but I can't do the artwork for them because I'm already overcommitted to these other 2. So I figure I can produce like 8 issues a year, quality writing and drawing. I can't do more than that. So I can write more, but I can't draw interiors anymore. And I did meet with Dark Horse and DC Comics at Rose City, and had them, and Phil Jimenez, and had them all review my books. And like, there weren't like a ton of critiques that they had that were terrible. They all seemed to really enjoy what I'm doing. But it also solidified I don't need to really work with another publisher or anything at the point.
Yeah, you've been around. I think your name carries some clout too. You have put out a good number of stuff that's high quality, and so people, like I said, that's why the Kickstarter, I feel like the Kickstarter did well because they're both, Murder Hobo and We Don't Kill Spiders, have fans from before, as well as your new fans that you've potentially gotten with 7 Years in Darkness and other stuff that you've released in shops and met at cons that added to that as well. I'm the kind of guy who is 9 o'clock in the morning when you launch the Kickstarter. I got to make sure I get my pledge in immediately, but there are going to be people who want the immediate satisfaction of going into a local comic book shop or going to your website or some website ordering it. So
a lot of people don't use Kickstarter, there are some people that only shop on Kickstarter, and there are other people that they're never going to hear about me unless it's in their comic book shop, because they're just not utilizing social media or anything like that. And that's fine. And that's part of the reason there is a direct market that still works, is because the majority of people, they're really just too busy to like do all this online crowdsourcing stuff. And I don't fault them for it. So yeah, I think everybody that backs the Kickstarter is getting something unique. Of course, there's the Kickstarter exclusive book plates, which I'll never produce again. Those are all signed and numbered. When you're doing crowdsourcing, you really have to have something special on there that they can't get anywhere else ever again. That's a key. But yeah, other than that, I trimmed down the whole project because it's not overstuffed. There's not 20 different covers to choose from. There's not 50 different reward tiers. I made 7 total, and one of them was a one and done tier. So, and then a lot of people now consume their comics digitally, and that's actually, I've gotten quite a bit of digital backers, so I thought that was really interesting as well, and I think everybody will be happy with what they get at the end of this. So,
which is awesome. I'm so excited for mine to come in. I do have my Murder Hobo Kickstarter stuff did come in already, which is pretty cool. I love that. And excited for it. What?
Up in good shape. I've gotten like 4 complaints that the post office decided to play hacky sack with their goods.
No, great shape, honestly. So I'm very happy. I've had a couple of times where I've always been scared about that kind of stuff too, but like I for some reason, even like my stuff from Ben that comes from Portland area as well up to Bangor is not usually is fine. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I've tracked it and it's tracked all the way to freaking Alaska and back, weirdly enough. But yeah, it's no, it came out great. It came out perfect condition.
Nice.
Which is great. Yeah. And but so finishing up here, horror's a huge thing in my life now, and that's why we did this horror week kind of thing over here at the podcast. And we're obviously talking to some other people in the horror genre. What's one movie that you guys, like you and your wife, have on the horror docket every single season or a Halloween season that you have to watch every year?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, I don't think my wife has a movie in particular that she has to watch every year. We usually, this year I've been trying to, like I said, I've been watching like Hulu and Paramount and stuff like that for the new stuff, because I mean, honestly, I think we're, as a society, we're getting too much into our member berries. If you ever watch South Park and want to know what that's, but we're not into trying out anything new. We just want to be comfortable with being refed the same old thing. And I'm guilty of it too, right? Like I've probably seen The Thing 200 times or something. There is other cinema in the world to like check out. So this is the year that I'm trying to get that mode. Listen, I watch horror movies year round. I watch a lot of them too. But this year I'd like to try something new and something different. So like, for example, I've been watching Yellow Jackets, which isn't necessarily horror, but it's definitely in that, it's one of those subgenres, right? And I think it's fantastic. You know, I don't know why I didn't give it a try sooner. And the stuff that I said that was on Hulu, there was one like, you will never, no one will save you or something like that. I thought that was fun. You know, it's the greatest movie on earth, but I gave it a try. And I enjoyed it. And yeah, so I think everybody should listen. Horror is booming right now. It's got the most creative, ideas in it. You can see something you've never seen before. So give something new a try this year is my advice. I would say my all-time favorite, like still gives me like, kind of vibes, is Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 1. Freddy is absolutely terrifying. He's not joking around. He's definitely like, he's got a creepy vibe. You can't ever really make out what he looks like. It wasn't until later films that you could really make out like how burned up he was, and like so yeah, I would say that's your go-to every Halloween, is at least watch Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1 once.
I agree with you in the idea of like trying new things, because I feel like the past 2 years has been like that. Right around this season when I get in the mood, yes, I watch horror movies all year long as well, but like this season is when I like, that's what I watch the majority of. And it goes the opposite. Like, so in like May, I might watch 1 or 2 horror movies in a month and a bunch of other movies, whereas in October it's 1 or 2 other movies and a bunch of horror movies. And but the past 2 years have been about like, there's so many horror movies out there that yet are either new or haven't seen before, that I was like, okay, I need to see these so I can go back and watch some of these other good horror movies, but I could also watch something I hadn't seen before and I don't know the ending. And I think that's where I'm leaning towards in 2022 and 23 around this season, is trying to watch the newer things. And I just watched Totally Killer. Is that the one that was on is it Hulu or is it Paramount? One of the Totally Killer or something like that. It's a time travel killer horror movie slasher movie. It's like Back to the Future meets like, I don't even know. Like, it's just, it's stupid silly, but like again, I enjoy it because it's just, I don't know, it's just this time of year I could watch a bunch of movies that are not that good and still enjoy them if they fall into that genre or subgenre of horror.
Have you seen Society yet?
No, I have not.
Society is pretty good for it, because you're saying that you're newer
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
That is not going to come across your table
Yeah.
easily. Society.
Let's get
It's
on that. So,
it's
there
an
you
intro.
go.
And then Last Cut of the Dead.
Hmm.
If have you seen Train to Busan?
That's in my, so that my wife and I are watching that this month. I have not seen that yet, but it's on the list.
Oh, that's a fantastic film.
Yes, I've heard that's too. I want to watch it. My wife, I want to watch it with my wife, and I just happen to do a lot of movies on my own, and so that one I have to wait for we have time together, kids asleep, stuff like that.
And the Netflix series Midnight Mass is great.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it last month again. It's
And
very
then
cool take on a particular part of the genre.
John Carpenter has that new series coming out too. That's like based on true stories. It's coming out on Hulu, I think it is. John Carpenter's something. What is it called?
Yeah, and he's like the last of the great horror directors, right? Because Wes Craven and Romero are both gone. Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities is amazing. But yeah, anything Michael Flannery does, I think that's his name. He did Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor, and then he did the Midnight Club, I think it was. All of his stuff is awesome. It's all horror based. And then his newest one is coming out. It's the Edgar Allan Poe House of Usher.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So definitely give that a gander. I just bought a whole bunch of books too that were like one reading. You know, you have like one little sitting and it's horror. And I think reading horror is actually a lot better if you're a creative.
Yes.
Because you know, first off, you're getting another voice to listen to, but the way that they set the imagery in your mind is always fantastic. But I found like 20 different books that were about 75 to 125 pages. Each one's unique, and there's a lot of new horror coming out all the time, and this is the month to check out that stuff. Also, on my daily walks every day, I listen to Aaron Mahnke's Cabinet of Curiosities or Lore. I listen to Morbid Podcast. That's always a pretty good one. That's these two women from Fall River, Mass, and they cover a lot of serial killers and spooky stuff. So
that's
yeah,
awesome.
my life is.
I just googled the what's the name of that series that's coming out? It's called Suburban Screams. It's on Peacock with John Carpenter, and it's some sort of like true crime / horror thing. But then you know, like Google gives you this like other questions people have asked about John Carpenter. Someone literally asked, which is better, The Thing 1982 or the 2011?
So the creator of the 2011 version has come out and fully said like they screwed up because they had the practical effects being done by the same company that did them in the 80s, but then they threw digital effects over the top of it because they thought that's what the audience wanted.
Yeah.
And they really the paranoia isn't really in that movie either, the way that it was in the, because people are still debating, like who was the Thing, and at the end, are they both the Thing, or is one of them the Thing? And you always hear the you know that Childs, you can't see his breath or some stuff, so he was clearly the Thing at some point. I don't know.
I'm currently halfway through Salem's Lot. I've never read any Stephen King books, honestly, ever, which is one of those things that as a Mainer, I feel like I'm, you know, people hate me for it. But no, I'm reading Salem's Lot. I love it. It's great. I actually just downloaded on, because my Prime membership has it. Amazon just did this thing called Creature Features. And it's like a 5 or 6 mini stories or like short stories from like Joe Hill, Grady Hendrix, Josh Mallerman, who is the other one? So some of these guys who have written like some substantially good horror books over the years. You know, Josh Mallerman did Bird Box. Joe Hill, obviously Joe Hill has done a bunch of stuff. Who was the other one that was in there too? There was someone else. I literally just download or just put it on my Prime because it's included in your Prime membership. So I was like, oh, I'll read these. They're all like, I don't know, 100-something pages, something like that.
Awesome. Yeah, honestly, shorter stories for horror are awesome as well.
Who was Paul Tremblay, who did Cabin in the Woods. That actually just said that movie came out, whatever it was. And then Jason Mott and Chandler Baker. There's like 5 or 6 stories that are doing that too. And a lot of times nowadays I'm doing some of them via audiobook, which is great too. And some of them have a pretty good person who is reading it, or they have like sound effects in the background or things like that that just add to the experience of reading horror. Because that's another thing. Horror is one of the reasons difference between horror comics or novels and horror movies is that you don't have sound effects and you don't have music and all that stuff to add to the ambiance of reading it. So you have to actually try to put that into some sort of either descriptive words in a novel or in the imagery in a comic book, which is can be difficult. But Joseph is nailing it.
You have to get and give them good direction on what you're looking to create there, and then it's on the letter, which is a whole other talent entirely. So.
Which you use pretty good lettering. We're big fans of DC Hopkins, so We Don't Kill Spiders. Our lettering by DC is amazing. So,
did you read? Did you hear what Eddie Gein done?
Yes, I read that last year.
That's horror, and it's based basically in reality. Of course, there's some liberties with we're hallucinating and seeing, things through his own perspective, but the story itself is nonfiction, and if you're into that like horrific nonfiction, because the truth is always more horrifying. Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. It's all about H.H. Holmes. If you haven't read that, fantastic read if you're into history as well. But a great Halloween type thing to listen to if you have an audiobook of it. Do you know who H.H. Holmes is?
I don't think so. The name doesn't sound familiar.
He was like the most prolific serial killer in American history, and that he's been tied to being Jack the Ripper and everything. I think it's kind of bull, but he had a murder in Chicago during the World's Fair, and there were just like greased up walls in it, and he was the only one that knew the layout of the building, so he could pull out like a wall, gas you in your room, and then drop you down this chute. And then he would sell your skeleton to like medical universities. So he was like a con artist, he was a thief, and he was a serial killer. And a highly fascinating story, and it all takes place, all of Eric Larson's books take place with a true crime in a world of some sort. So he's got like 8 or 9 nonfiction stories out there that are great to read, but Devil in the White City is the best.
That's awesome. That's what the Devil in the White City. You have Shamir Worm comes out in January. Is that correct? Or is that the tentative dates for that? Or
that Lunar featured it on the cover thing, which I thought was really cool. I did not ask for that, so it's always good to have some sort of recognition for the work you're doing. I also think it didn't hurt that they were, the solicitations are in October, and it's clearly a horror story.
Yes. That's pretty funny. I don't know. I saw online, but Cullen Bunn's The Legacy of Violence Volume 2 has my pull quote on the back of the trade from the website. And I was just reading the digital advanced copy of it. I was like skimming through. I got to the very end. Normally I know the end of the story. Okay, it says the end at the bottom of it, or like to be continued. And I'm like, okay, I'm reading the digital copy. I just scroll up and do a different book or whatever. But I was like, oh, I'll see what the back of the cover looks like. Or sometimes these advanced copies don't even have them. Sometimes it's just literally starts at the panel and goes to the last panel on them. And I scroll through and I'm like, it's like 10:30 at night. I'm looking at it. I'm like, holy shit, what the hell? This is awesome. I told Paul I was going to go to Galactic Comics and turn all their volume 2s around so the back is facing out.
Well, you got to use that now. You want to get quotes on the backs of
Yeah,
books.
exactly. But no, so yeah, Shamir Worm is out in January, which is awesome. Again, you're gonna be able to look for We Don't Kill Spiders and so on and stuff like that. You also have a cover coming out for Tinian's new book, right?
Yeah, The Deviant
Mhm.
next month comes out. We're just waiting to get final trade dressing on it before I can really show it off. I've shown the art, but we wanted it dressed
Mhm.
because it is a newer title. I'm not into the virgin cover, to be honest with you.
No.
No, I prefer my stuff to be dressed so that, 90% of the people that are walking up to me at a show, they don't know what it is that I'm selling. So if it's a virgin cover and I have to explain it, I'm kind of wasting their time a little bit. You always have to have a good elevator pitch for these things. But the Deviant looked really cool. I've never drawn a creepy killer Santa before. The original version of it was denied because they thought I made him too fat. I had to make him skinny. But I saw Megan Hitchinson just had her variant come out. Oh, and that one looked creepy and cool as well. There's like James just keeps churning out these like awesome horror stories. So I'm really curious. They didn't show me any of the interiors for this. It was just the general concept of the Santa Claus. So
that's amazing. That's yeah, because I mean the World Tree was amazing too, and that the trade of that comes out right around the same time as Deviant comes out on the first issue of that one too. So they'll be able to...
so 9 issues, and I think by the time it's done, the trade will come out next Christmas. Something like that.
Just it's so cool, and it's two of my favorite seasons are back to back. We have Santa, a creepy, horrific serial killer Santa Claus is like it meets my like top. So when I saw them tease that, I was like texting Paul at Galactic, being like, "Oh my god," because I just like I love Tinian stuff, I love creepy stuff, and I love Santa Claus. So you add all that together, and you hit a home run there for me. I'm excited for it for sure.
That's my that was my newest variant that I've done this year, and now is what I call the like dry zone where most of the companies don't put out it's garbage time for you won't see number ones come out again until March. That's when all the new big series will start, is March, April, May, somewhere in there, and then that builds into like some sort of San Diego. There's another big release of stuff. October is pretty much the last month that you're going to see the really big number ones coming out. Of course, James Tinian, very popular writer, so his first issue coming out in November isn't really going to hurt him, especially since it takes place during Christmas.
Yeah,
so
makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I'm excited for that, and going forward, it's going to be amazing to see more We Don't Kill Spiders and more 7 Years in Darkness. I'm just excited. I'm so excited.
April is issue 7 Years in Darkness Year 2 issue 1 comes out then, and how this book comes out is bi-monthly, but it for some reason it always takes longer. That's not my doing. That's the publisher has to amp up their game, I guess. But issue 4 I think is supposed to come out this month at some point.
Yes, I believe so.
I haven't heard anybody see it anywhere yet, and but yeah, it's supposed to be out soon. So keep your eyes on your shelves for issue 4. Shamir Worm comes out in January. The progress report will be out in February. So if you've missed issues 1 through 4 and you enjoyed the Shamir Worm, you'll want to catch up and see how everything got to where it was. And then year 2, number 1 comes out in April.
That's awesome. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to happy Halloween and happy anniversary to you and your wife. And I'm so happy to talk to you again. We love having you on here and chatting. Thanks for taking time out of your day to talk horrific things and more here on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Are we going to party at Bangor this weekend?
I guess so. I mean, I don't know for sure. I got the whole weekend set. I mean, my wife knows I'm not around. So she's pregnant right now. So it's next year's convention up here that's gonna be a little bit more difficult. Now we only have a 2-year-old who's pretty good. And so he goes to bed.
You're amping up for punishment, huh? Is this the second or a third kid?
Second child.
All right. That's
one.
You can't it's when you start getting into 3 and 4 that I'm like, oof.
Yeah.
you're in trouble.
I don't want to be outnumbered. That's me personally. I like the idea that I have, like, one kid, one parent. I have one, she has one. We can hold on. We can share duties.
My life changed when both of my kids finally entered school, and now they're both in middle school together. So it's fascinating to watch them grow, and I did get complaints early on about my oldest daughter drawing so many scary things until we had a parent teacher conference where I had to tell them what I did for a living. And then I think it was the guidance counselor just got up and packed up her stuff, and they're like, "Where are you going?" She's like, "This all makes sense now. There's nothing wrong with this kid."
We have an idea. We now know why.
Yeah. I was like, "Wait, did you guys think she was like possessed or something?"
Okay, the priest walks away from they were standing outside. The priest is outside ready to do an exorcism. Nope, they're gone. We got it. We understand now.
Above our fireplace is Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger, like giant pictures of them. I'm like, this is our house. This is how we live. It's a constant state of horror, which is funny because Ruby is, dresses in all black, loves game, and watches all the horror stuff. And my other kid is like pink and ponies and fairy tales, and she can't stand horror. And we took her to see that movie Talk to Me, because we all watched the trailer.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see that. And at the end of it, she wouldn't talk to me for like an hour. She was just like pissed. And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "You know how I feel about movies like that." And I was just like, "I didn't know it was going to end that way." Not giving anything away. Well, you should see the movie. It's good.
Well, now I feel like I have to see it before I see you on Friday so we can talk about it.
But yeah, that's one last thing I can say about horror is you can never predict how a horror movie is going to end. Most action movies, you can figure out how this is going to go down, right? You know how John Wick's going to end.
Mm-hmm.
You know how The Avengers is going to end. But now you have no idea how a horror movie, like, it can end funny, it can end sad, it can end horribly. 90% of the time the monster is still around, and it's probably going to kill the person off in the next movie. So yeah.
But thank you so much, Joe, for taking time out of your day to talk to us. I look forward to seeing you this weekend. And keep up the good work.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.